it seems to me it's much more about awareness. And I know that my own awareness varies depending on my currency, depending on the parachute that I'm jumping, whether I'm sort of task loaded in the free fall and I'm carrying some of that emotional momentum into my Canopy ride. And I feel like if we were to really make a difference in these statistics, one of the best things that we can do is foster a culture where, number one, we talk about it before we get on the plane, but more importantly, after opening, everybody check your parachute, make sure it's okay, point it away from the jump run, right, perpendicular to the jump run, and take some deep breaths and slow down and expand your awareness. You just went through a major athletic event. You're exhausted. I've tracked away from some skydives where, I was really, if I could just sit down on a park bench, that would be the ideal situation, to just spend a minute or so. And we've got the time if we open at 3.5. You got more time if you open at 4.5. Imagine if everybody opened at 4.5, and from 4.5 to 3.5, all they did was de-escalate their emotional condition and look around at the other chess pieces and get a sense of not only where they want to land, but also who we can expect to be there in the pattern with us. I think that is really the heart of the issue. Is people are just, they on one hand are highly escalated physiologically, and therefore their brain is less active. The left front part of your brain is not functioning well, and you add to that hypoxia, not only from altitude, but also from this athletic event that we just did. There's really some simple steps that, I'm sure you do this too, right after opening. Kind of slow yourself down and take some deep breaths and relax your muscles and say, okay, brand new chapter. Let's kind of push the reset button on the emotional state.
I wish I could say I consciously did that, but I don't know that I always do.
Yeah, well, I know that I don't always. Yeah, there's times when we're open too low or we've got too much going on. But even if we just, as we're flying the pattern, consciously, big deep breaths, slow down, relax our muscles, get a little smile back on our face instead of the fidgety eye, panic kind of state of mind. Just try to expand our awareness a little more through relaxing a little bit more physiologically, and we can take in more. We know that people that are in negative emotional states have a narrower scope of attention. We get fixated on what we're talking about. We want to be right when we're angry, and we don't hear other people's point. Right? So we get our compassion, our ability to see through other people's eyes diminishes. So I think if we were to just make that part of our jump, just like a pin check, just like a ground winds check and an aloft winds check before we... there's an airplane taking off without you. What's that all about?
You can hear that, huh?
Yeah. I know that I don't always do it as much as I could. Sometimes I'm very, very good about it. But I find that if I can get my students, my Canopy class students, to do this, to actually make this part of their ritual, their landings improve. And there's skill associated with flying the pattern, but there's also awareness, right? So it's not just a mechanistic process. This is about keeping your head on a swivel and looking for the unconsidered possibility.
So now we're at opening point, right? We've opened, we've taken a deep breath. But before we move on from there, you mentioned hypoxia, and that was one of the Facebook comments we got from Peter Williams. He says, can any known canopy collisions be attributed to the after effects of hypoxia, or is it always blamed on poor judgment or poor planning, etc.? And are there any simple tests which the jumper can carry out to identify symptoms?
Yeah, well, in high levels of hypoxia, obviously you look at your fingernails and other people can see your lips turning blue. If you see those symptoms before exit, obviously it's time to do something about it or stay in the airplane. Long, slow, deep breaths. Don't get up so soon. Make sure your seatbelt's off. Check your gear. Now there's nothing else to do but relax more, and maybe be quiet for a few minutes before exit so you can kind of calm down. But the truth is that once the door comes open, we tend to stop thinking about that. We're focused on getting in the door in the right position and who's going out when and adequate separation. There's so much going on. And from that point forward, we're in this intensity mode where the hypoxia starts creeping back in. Hypoxia is not only about high altitude. That's the part that I think I want to raise awareness about, is you can create hypoxia right now at sea level just by changing your breathing. It's just about lack of oxygen in your bloodstream and therefore to your brain. And so if you're not breathing well on the skydive, and then you add to that a weird opening or, something happens on the break off that gets your attention and freaks you out, you can find yourself deprived of the necessary oxygen and other nutrients to your brain that allow you to be the full self that you intended to be. So most of the time in this sport, we have little issues with complacency. We have little issues with not knowing enough. We have little issues with lack of planning. But I find that it's execution errors that we suffer from the most. We intended to fly a good pattern, but we blew it. We intended to do a perfect exit, but we blew it. So that's much more about getting into the state of mind and reacquiring our productive state of mind. When you kind of calm down and get yourself back into that right mindset.
Okay, so now we're at that point. We've taken our breath. Maybe we've even gone through our post-opening procedures. As far as we've got our slider stowed, we've got all those little housekeeping duties done. Now, what's the next step in avoiding these collisions? And specifically, can you comment, are there any better or worse ways to scan for traffic as far as like the actual mechanics of where we're looking for traffic?
Right, that's a good point, because of course when you learn how to fly airplanes, it's pretty specific in the methodology that seems to work the best, where you start at one side and you scan top to bottom, and you keep taking these sort of radials as you shift your head a little bit to the side a little more, and top to bottom slowly, top to bottom. That works quite well. I don't always do it that methodically. I don't know that you do. I don't know if you have words on that.
Well, in an airplane, yes, I have a fairly systematic way of scanning back and forth like that. I don't know that I really do that under Canopy. I was more asking. Sometimes we tend to look ahead of us, and then maybe we look in the direction we're getting ready to turn. But that doesn't mean that even if that area is clear right now, we don't know that area is going to be clear by the time we turn and get to it. So, there could be a canopy above us doing a turn or overtaking us from behind where maybe we can't see him at all. So I'm just wondering if you've put any thought into, kind of what I would like to come from this conversation, at least partially, is some actual maybe fundamentals that people can apply.
Right, yeah. So, obviously, looking before you turn, that's the biggest one, right? With all the canopy collisions that I know of, there was a turn involved, whether it was a hook turn or somebody simply maneuvering. So not only looking, if I'm going to turn to the right, I don't just look to the right, I look down to the right, because that's where I'm going. My canopy tends to lose altitude in a turn. So given that, I want to look in that general direction. But at the same time, I'm also scanning on level and above level. I'm not technically responsible for what goes on above me. The low canopy has a right-of-way for a reason, because I can't see directly above me unless I wiggle my parachute around. And in the pattern, people are not expected to do that. They don't tend to do it. You're looking down at your target. But if you add to that just a little bit of scanning above to get some sense of what's on the way, certainly that can add to it. But here's another aspect, and we're going to see an article on dropzone.com that I just finished up. Within the next day or two, it's going to be up, called Saved by the Beep. I've come to the conclusion that accuracy and problems with accuracy and also problems with traffic have an awful lot to do with people looking at the ground and then looking at their altimeter. They look at the ground and they look at their altimeter under canopy. And as they get lower, they look at their altimeter less and less and the ground more and more because they're scared to take their eyes off of the high-speed dirt, as Roger Nelson used to call it. Well, for many of us, switching to audible cueing for our pattern points so that we don't have to look at the altimeter quite so much, so we know how high we are throughout the approach, in other words, like a heads-up display, I think that if everybody had those, it would reduce the risks more because you can spend more time scanning and less time staring at your altimeter. So I think that that's going to be a pretty big step. At one point, having an automatic activation device on your rig was weird, right? We didn't want to jump with those people because it was new technology and we worried about the consequences. Just like now, you suggest to an AFF instructor, hey, what if you were to put a beeper in your student's ear that not only told them when the ground is coming for free falls end, but also in the pattern, you've got beeps that tell you where you are at various altitudes. They're going to say, no, forget about it. I want my student to learn altitude awareness by looking with their eyes. But what if we were training their eyeballs by having a beep, by having an audible cue? At that moment, they're looking at the ground, boom, that's 900 feet. That's what it looks like. I think there's going to be a little bit of resistance to that idea, but in the end, if you really think about it, it's a wonderful tool. It really can expand awareness by reducing task loading.
And you think a lot of people, let's talk about maybe more experienced jumpers. Let's say, I don't know, I hate to throw a number. Let's say somebody 1,000 jumps plus. Do you still think a lot of them spend a lot of time looking at their altimeters?
Well, I mean, any time in the pattern,
under Canopy.
Yeah. Yeah, well, no, a lot of them don't use their altimeter very much under Canopy, but that's not necessarily a good thing, is it? Right? If they have no information coming in about their altitude other than their visual appraisal, which is not, it's not a quantifiable thing. You get a sense that you're getting low, and you get kind of good at noticing the difference between 900 and 600. But I don't know the difference between 900 and 850 visually. So I think that even though that many of the experienced jumpers aren't spending that much time looking at their altimeters, any time spent looking at your altimeter below 1,000 feet is wasted time, time that could be spent scanning for the other people. So and of course they'd be more altitude aware as a result.
What about pattern entry?
Mm-hmm.
Is this kind of the beginning of the whole process, right? If we can all fly, let's say, a standard left-hand pattern, and all enter on the downwind,
mm-hmm.
and we're all doing 90-degree turns, well, then that's a pretty predictable pattern, right?
Well, it's mostly predictable, but the reality is that we've got various size canopies. Even if you look at a big way, where you've got hundreds of people all landing in the same traffic pattern, it tends to flow well, but the size of the pattern and the locations associated with each altitude is going to be very, very different. So there's still opportunity for collisions, even if everybody's flying a basic pattern, unless we all jump the same parachutes and put on weight if we're light under that canopy, right? So it's still going to have opportunities for collision for those who are not looking around. So that only reduces the risks. Eliminating obviously impossible. We're jumping out of planes. Yeah.
Just a slight bit of dropout from you there. You said eliminating is impossible. Is that correct?
I think it is. That we're going to continue to see accidents in this sport, but the question is, are the accidents going to be the weird, anomalous, whoa, I didn't think of that? Or is it going to be, oh, no, it's that one again? So those are the ones that bug me, so, where we've seen it so many times before.
So now then, that kind of leads us to one of the big questions and debates. Let's see, Ian Ball kind of touches on this a little bit. He says, is this isolated to high-speed performance landings, or is there no real pattern to this? And a lot of the debate that I've heard both online and around the drop zone is that it's a swooper problem, that they're causing this problem, and the swoopers are saying that's not fair. What's your thoughts on that whole